Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 10th day of the New Earth Summit. Now in its third year, India's first integrative summit on solutions to our problems in health, food, farming, and environment. I'm Sophie Sequeira from the Earth Keepers Connect Goa, your host for this evening. And I extend a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists, as well as to our audience, on behalf of our summit convener, Daryl De Souza, and our 10 Earthkeeper groups in India and overseas. We express our gratitude to you for taking time out from your busy schedules to be with us today and to share your insights and experience so that all watching this live webinar and its recording later may benefit from the holistic science and wisdom presented on this platform that will help us all co-create a beautiful world. So our topic for today is Lessons from the Indigenous Tribes and the UNDRIP 2007 Declaration. So I will start with introducing our three panelists for today to the audience. The first panelist, Daryl De Souza, who has been teaching people how to reverse chronic illnesses with integrated natural therapies for over 16 years. After his own journey of 14 years of illness that almost ended his life in 2004 due to allopathic medicine failing him. His book, Become Healthy or Extinct, as well as his lectures, seminars, webinars, workshops, and residential retreats on mind, body, and spirit healing are sought out by individuals and organizations across the globe. Darryl was the secretary of the World United Doctors and Healers Association for 5 years, during which he curated and convened their annual continued medico-spiritual education conferences. Darryl is also an industrial engineer, organic farmer, environmentalist, TEDx speaker, founder of Earthkeepers Connect, ambassador of Vegan Nation, and convener of the New Earth Summit, as well as a speaker at the World Parliaments on Spirituality. For over 20 years, Darryl has been researching soil biology, animal, plant, and human biology, marine biology, planetary ecology, and holistic living as well, which inspired him to launch the New Earth Summit as a platform to showcase integrated and symbiotic functioning. His work is detailed on daryldeSouza.com. Our second panelist is Chandra Vikash Shivastava, who did his BTech from IIT Kharagpur and MBA from IIM Calcutta. He has worked with Tata Consultancy Services, Arvind Mills, and SAIL in the past, and is the founder of Indian Dynamics, as well as the founder of 10 Systems and Services. Chandra Vikash is the convener of Gaia Earth Sansad, which stands for Global Assembly of Indigenous and Autonomous Community States. Its details are at gaiasansad.org. He is the chief mentor and innovative coach at Gaia Innovation Labs of the Global Academy for Indigenous Activism. He is an Indigenous researcher and activist who dedicated the last 12 years of his life for the Indigenous ecological, socio-economic, cultural, spiritual, and geopolitical causes. Chandra Vikash has developed LACE Gaia model, where LACE stands for Localized Abundance and Circular Economy, which he presented through several international and national research papers at the ITS World Congress 2004 in Japan, in 2009 in Sweden, at the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education in Canada in 2017, and at the Congress for New Urbanism in Australia in 2018. And finally, our last panelist, Rahul Banerjee, who is an alumnus of IIT Kharagpur, where he did his BTech in civil engineering, as well as Center for Economic Planning and Technology, University, Ahmedabad, where he did his PhD in environmental planning and management. He is a social activist and development researcher who works along with Bill Adivasis, indigenous people, to synthesize their traditional qualities with modern skills and to contribute to equitable, gender sensitive, and sustainable development as architects of their own future. Through the organizations Kedut Mazdur Chetna Sangat, a trade union, thus Gramin Vikas Kendra, a public trust which won the Times of India Social Impact Award in 2011, and Mahila Jagat Lihal Samiti, a registered society. He has participated in promoting and preserving the indigenous knowledge, livelihood, and culture of the Bhil community and countered its internal patriarchy over a period of 3 decades using mass mobilization, policy advocacy, development implementation, media advocacy, research, and legal action. He works in the fields of Adivasi rights, gender rights, education, health, natural resource conservation, sustainable agriculture, and decentralized water supply and sanitation. He has carried out a host of research and implementation projects for agencies such as the World Bank, United Nations Development Programme, Department for International Development UK, International Water Management Institute, Sir Dorabji Tata Trust, the Hunger Project, Action Aid, and many others. He has published extensively through articles in reputed journals and books, and his blog is anar-kali.blogspot.in. His website is rahulbanerjeeactivist.in. So, for the next 1 hour of this webinar, I have a couple of questions for our panelists, which will be followed by a Q&A section with our audience at 7 p.m., who may type in their questions in the Q&A box below even before that time. If you would like to receive the recorded video of this webinar, or you want to share it with others, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The New Earth Summit. So now for my questions to the panelists. Darryl, can you please share with us about the lessons the world needs to learn from the indigenous tribes?
Thank you, Sophie, and good evening to everyone. Namaste, Rahul ji, Chandra, Vikash ji. So, yes, I will like to start with this presentation. It's just pictures in which I will give a short narration, 21 pictures. I want to complete this story about indigenous people. So I'll just put on my presentation. So this is the picture I made, and you can see on the left hand side indigenous people, whatever their color is, and some of their habitats on the right hand side. So I'll just take you to some things that I have highlighted in this lovely picture. So the first thing is that it is easy to see that all of these communities, they are settled where there was water. You can see a river over there, or maybe it's the seaside. And also in the background of the other villages, even if you cannot see the water, in the background you can see some hills and mountains, which is the catchment area. So that means there will be groundwater in that area, and through digging wells, they will get their water supply. One of the basic things that human beings need. And then with water supply, of course, you can grow your own food and you have your food supply also. Now, when we talk about ancient or indigenous communities, people come to this, uh, debate of hunter-gatherers and all of that. So I just wanted to say a simple thing. If the society, these indigenous tribes, if they evolved to the level where they could master farming, then they could remain in that same place and develop the whole area, because they would not need to, be hunter-gatherers. So whenever a community could not master farming and make themselves self-sufficient in food, they found the necessity to move around, and shut shop at one place and then go and forage at another place. So just wanted to put in there, a more advanced community will learn to make their own food. Now, another word or term over there in blue, local, ABCD, asset-based community development. It means that whatever assets were there in their area, they learn to make from that their own food, their products and services, which would give them a complete life. All their home building materials, as you can see, their boats and whatever they needed for art and design and craft, and ensure their culture and sing, song, dance, everything, they would all get from their local area itself. Uh, Now the next word is organic, meaning that things that will naturally decompose over time. So food, or even homes over some few hundreds of years, human body over a certain time. And that means in such community, as time passed, there was no residue left over. So every five elements, they were returned back to the soil. Now self-sufficient, meaning that they made everything themselves and they did not need anything from anyone else. And when they used to travel, it was more of a exchange of, to go to see other places, culture, or sometimes for exchange of some artifacts or spices and all of that. But mainly if you talk of food, if we live by the scientific principle of eat fresh, local, seasonal, then you really do not know to need to go to some other land to bring food for yourself. So you can be self-sufficient in food. Now, what happens when you make most of the things that you need for your entire life in your own community or in your state? Let's say I'm talking about the state of Goa or the state of Delhi. Uh, this Maharashtra. So if you learn to be self-sufficient, then you do not need to travel to earn a living. That means whatever goods and services are needed, if you of course education is required in the community, so you can be a teacher, there's arts and culture, so you can be an artist, there is home building, there's rainwater harvesting, there's food preparation, there is clothes preparation. So if you're self-sufficient, then there's a very high chance of you. Of course, in these indigenous communities, they never travel for work. All of their work they would get in the same place. So when you are able to make your food and have your work also in the same place, then you do not need to have all these transport vehicles for goods all over the place, and you do not need vehicles for also traveling to work up and down long distances. What we do nowadays in our big cities, sometimes traveling is 1 hour or 1.5 hour to work one way in a day. So lesser transport of vehicles for work and for food. I'm just taking two areas. It brings down the need for that many amount of vehicles, that much amount of petrol, that much lesser amount of mining to get all these materials to make all these vehicles, and the plastic and resin and all made of this petroleum products. So also lesser amount of packaging materials for transfer of goods and products. You don't need to store and transport to distances. So a lot of right resources and non-renewable resources of the planet are saved. So now I'd like to go to my next slide. So some hundreds of years ago, we had these indigenous communities all across the world who were doing their own thing and remaining sufficient. Then we had the advent of civilization and groups of men. We can call them businessmen. The first group of businessmen who looked at the picture on the right hand side top. They were looking at what are the products and services available in different lands as they traveled, and they said, well, we can make some money by transporting these things from point A to point B. Now these guys were mainly traders, uh, and they hardly made things themselves in their local land. Uh, when they decided that we should make business out of other people's sufficiency in their local areas, so then all of this trade came about. And to shift goods and products and services and volumes, you needed vehicles and you needed machinery. So that's the picture on the left bottom. So suddenly the need came for lots of mining to take out all these metals from the belly of the earth and start making holes in the earth to make these machines and make all these for example, what I say, non-organic, whatever the villagers were making, something different than that. So machines came into it. And then for this trade, this whole system of money, because people would not, want to carry gold and all that for trade. So that's where the central bankers came in, saying that, you can give us your gold and we will, give you equivalent paper currency at your point, at your location, so you don't get robbed on the way. So this entire system of banking and all also came about. Now the other part was it was a new world that they were making for themselves, and businessmen will always take care of their business interests. So they started. This is just a place that's a laboratory where they started inventing all these new things in the name of innovation. And all of these things would of course come from, glass would come from sand, metal would come from minerals, and they started making these machines to do all of this kind of work. And this is a kind of a closed laboratory, and those same things what they started innovating as innovators and scientists, they started teaching these other sciences that are the future of humanity, and they started teaching all of this in the universities and the colleges, and it was all to just promote their business, right? There were people all across the globe earlier who were self-sufficient. They never asked for this, but these businessmen who wanted to develop new lands and bring products and services and goods and all to some new lands, they devised this model, and then they started teaching it all over the place, that this is the meaning of development. Now what has happened is, from all of these institutions and all, on the left hand side you can see the traditional natural herbal medicine system that was there with the indigenous is still there and will continue to remain there. And they brought in a replacement system on the right hand side, which is the allopathic medicine system for popping pills for high BP, cholesterol, diabetes, and all of that. So the right represents the revenue model that you pay for these tablets all the time, and these tablets do not cure you of any of these medicines. So the customers kept on being there and buying more pills and making more and more money for the people who invented this system. Secondly, also same thing happened in our food. All the people across the world earlier had their own local fresh foods, but these businessmen who wanted to do a food business said, well, we will make foods and we'll transport them all across the place and we'll make money out of it. So that's how the packaged food products with preservatives, with stabilizers, and all of these now malls that you see are holding all of this non-fresh, and sickening formats of food with all these chemicals inside them. Now, This is a picture of the resources that are excavated from the earth and that get depleted permanently. I'm just talking of the right hand side of the previous picture, just for packaged food products. Now I can give you an example of so many other white goods and 100 other things we use in our lives. But just talking of packaged food products, whether if it's a paper carton, then and it's got some plastic lining like a this Amul milk packet, then you have cutting of trees for that paper, then the plastic and plastic bottles will cause more and more extraction of oil from the earth, making holes in the earth. Then you have, if it's a tin product, on the left hand side bottom, you have mineral excavation and again holes in the earth. And on the right hand side, you have sand, which is going for glass bottles and all of that. Okay, so this is what happens when people form a different kind of system and decide to make a business of food, of health, and of so many other things that I'm saying again were available locally to all those people on the planet earlier. They had never, the local people in different countries, they had never asked for anything. They just said, leave us alone, let us live our lives, and we are happy. And now with all this model over the last 200 years, this is the current state of the planet that we have manifested, following all those innovative sciences from their colleges and universities and implementing all their policies. And they brought in, all their collaborators in the form of, government officials and putting in policies that have manifested this. So we are facing this problem with the earth and this problem with our health. So everything has become a business for these people. And now in the world, even this pharma business and people are understanding and giving it a name called the globalists or the elites who have organized the entire system to make money for themselves, but that actually do not serve the people. This is not health and healing. This is taking advantage of your sickness. Now, at the Third World Parliament on Spirituality, I had presented this topic, Dharma and the Earth Keepers. I would urge everyone to, go to my YouTube channel and watch it. You'll get the link for my YouTube channel on my website, darryldesouza.com. Now, in this presentation, if I just want to say in a couple of lines, I said that human beings are the only species on this planet who have violated Dharma. Now, what is Dharma means? Duty. And what was our duty? Like all other species on this planet are following the duty. Their duty was that they partake of all the 5 elements from Mother Earth, I say, and Father Sky, like earth, water, fire, air, space. You eat a groundnut and that has got more of earth element. You squeeze it, you will see the oil coming out of it, that's water element. And then if you eat too much of groundnuts, you get, fire in your belly, acidity. So that's the fire element. Air and space is lesser, right? But if you eat some fruit, then you will see water element is the highest. So what we have done, what the indigenous people have been doing since thousands of years is taking the food in its natural form in the 5 elements, or taking the wood, or taking the soil, using it to build their homes and all of that. And after their life is done, their bodies are back in the soil, and their civilization moves or it dies down, then all those natural elements go back to the earth. But human beings, with our modern innovations that we learned from all these universities, okay, we have made plastic that doesn't decompose and so many other things on this planet that are toxic. We have taken the air, put it in machines, put it in our vehicles, and polluted the air. So there's the air pollution problem on the planet. We have taken the water and contaminated it. We have taken food and we've turned it into something that cannot be called food anymore. So human beings are the only ones, because of their, I don't say this is the fault of every human being. No, it's not our fault. We are just our fault, maybe because we went to these universities and we learned all these sciences that taught us how to destroy this world and to destroy all these 5 elements. So this is where we are now, and this is what we call innovation. And can you see anything natural in this picture? This is a picture of Chicago. Okay. The only thing is, what is natural, you can see something that is untouched, and that's on the horizon, and that's the sea. Otherwise, all these structures, they've come up through concrete and glass and metal and alloys and all of that. They've all come up, and because of some holes created in the earth at different other places. So this is what we are calling as, modern civilization. And I have, in other presentations, I have called the concrete jungles as the graveyards of humanity. Because there are severe health issues that come from this. If you watch some of my other talks in this summit, you will come to understand. Uh, this manifests an unhealthy body, mind, and spirit, as well as it damages the Gaia or the planet to a very, very great extent. And again, yeah, just wanting to say that this is maintained by, this again, some new and newer sciences come in all of these universities, and none of them look at, things that are natural. Now, what is this? This is what I call an open school. This is an open university. People who live here from morning to evening, children, youth, adults, senior people, they interact with nature all the time, and nature talks to them. And through trial and error, or from generation to generation, like the indigenous people pass knowledge, everything is learnt over here in the open school. So even the healthcare sciences are learnt here, even food production is learnt here, even how to interact with animals, they learn in the open environment, how to take care of the purity of the five elements, everything is learnt over here. And this is just a short quote of Red Indians. In fact, in a friend of mine in Goa, on his wall, there was a very big picture frame, and I read kind of like a charter of the Red Indians. I could not find the snap of it to put it in the presentation, but it was talking about this thing called Great Spirit. The Great Spirit is there all across the cosmos, and it is there within us and each one of us. So they are talking about God over here. And this was about 10 years back. And I started reading the definition of God in other indigenous communities. Though the translation and the wordings were slightly different, they were talking about the same concept of God, which they got with their interaction in the open university. But the biggest problem that has happened with modern civilization is that okay, so in an indigenous community, if you ask all those 5 questions, people will laugh at you because they know all the answers to those. But here in our modern civilization, we have got great big deep workshops that go on for 15, 20 days to just answer these 5 questions. Now, why has this happened? It has happened because of these great innovative capitalists who cut us out from nature. Like that, remember that picture of Chicago. Who are you talking to? You are talking to your neighbor. And what are you talking about? You're talking about what sciences were presented on the TV and on the radio and what you learned in your university. So this is how human beings got disconnected from real nature, from the living sciences, and they started listening to everything that these so-called experts were telling them. And unfortunately, this is my understanding. I speak at the World Parliaments on Spirituality, and I've been researching spirituality for a very long time. And I have come to this very clear understanding that all these different religions of the world are done by all these experts in their closed environments, and it has brought such a big division across all the communities of the globe. So that is also, I'm saying, the biggest problem that we are trying to help people understand across the world, across the different religions, is that God is one, we are one, and it's just, if there's some difference, it's only cultural differences, it's geographical differences. So this is one of the biggest problems manufactured by these kind of setups. I was just trying to make something very understandable to people who are listening. If you are out in nature, if you live and you participate with nature doing natural things, you will understand what great spirit is. You will understand what God is. And nobody will have to tell you, and you don't have to go to a university or do a PhD in all of this to understand. So this is I realized all of this at a point in time in 2010 where I ran away from my home in Mumbai, and I was part of one movement, and the theme was from a madhouse to a mud house. So the picture down is my home in Goa when I just came and renovated it. The house in the center, we renovated it in 1980, but the inner mud walls are still 200 years old. On the left hand side, you can see one house on the left hand side where the tiles are not so good. That is our storehouse, and I didn't renovate it. But that storehouse is 200 years old. It is made on laterite stone at the bottom. It has got wooden beams for pillars, and it's got mud, and it's got tuna, and it's got tiles. So, I mean, this is what construction can be. You don't have to have a, just a straw home or a bamboo home that will, have a lifespan of 30, 40, 50 years. With natural materials, we can have structures like this. And if we are a little innovative, we can make our homes very comfortable. So, and here is a picture of me. We're growing my own food. I grow about 25 fruits and vegetables just in 2,200 square feet. Trying to set a good example of self-sufficiency in food and all of that. And there's a well close by, so I have well water also. So I'm just trying to say that it's easy to transition to a natural life, to very low consumption or destruction of the planet. So whatever is being talked about now in the world today, even at the global level, you see, and they are just our oil supply is almost going out, coal supply is going out, and we are not talking of humanity and human life and civilization that is going to last more than 50 years. But if you go the indigenous way, and this is what we're trying to present in the New Earth Summit, if you follow the right ecological sciences, then you can design this entire system to last for another 2,500 years. And of course, people will think, why only 2,500 years? Why not forever? So there is a deeper aspect of this, which I, present in my spiritual retreats. And it's about the yugas or the time periods, at least Indians should know about it, that there is a Kali Yuga, which we have just come out of, and we are getting into Dwapar Yuga, which is about 2,500 years. Then there's Treta Yuga of 3,300 and Sat Yuga of 4,400. And as these yuga changes, the density around this planet changes, the intelligence of human beings change, what we eat as food also, that also changes. In the ascending cycle, your food becomes lighter and lighter because your body also becomes lighter and lighter. And I will present this tomorrow in my very interesting talk of the food masterclass. So what I'm talking about is now that this design that we are doing to the New Earth Summit, and of course there are other people across the planet and groups also who are going in this, very introspective and very detailed natural sciences. They are able to design systems like this. And after 2,500 years, of course, we will all be there, and we will have deeper sciences which are in tune with our consciousness, with the environment around us, with our physical body, and all of that. So the education will change. So for now, at least, we feel that the 2,500 years design is good, not something that is coming from this modern innovation system that will not even give us more than 50 years. And we are going towards this eco friendly, I'm just doing a model of it in Goa, over 500 to 1,000 acres. And we were trying to make a eco-friendly, self-sustained, circular economy, where we will have our education systems, our work systems, our food systems integrated in a very nice place. I've not made this design just for that. This is some picture I took, but this is the future that we are looking at if we want to save our states and this planet. Now, this is something what I was doing just before this pandemic started. Okay, at my wellness center. So you can see just in one day, we were at 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. There was a health workshop teaching people how to reverse illnesses, not maintaining them, but teaching them how to reverse with natural therapies. Then also we are hosting an organic market. Then some art, music, and dance. Then jumble sale, recycle, reuse, exchange, then also movie screening, and that's part of the education system, educating people on all of these topics: better health, better food, farming, environment, sustainability, all of that. And lastly, some healthy dinner. And somewhere in April, mid-April, I had to shut down my center because of this big thing that happened to humanity and this planet. Okay, I presented this a couple of days back. On the left hand side, there is these business guys who are called the globalists. Uh, their offer, the only solution is the vaccine. And the people who follow natural sciences in a decentralized system, there are so many local sciences, and this is what I used also when I had a 1 week of COVID symptoms in May. I used integrative natural medicine sitting in my house and got cured. And so did my 82-year-old mother. So now I hope you can read this clearly. So there is no pandemic in the jungles, supposedly from where this kind of virus came out. They are not going through any pandemic. So that's one thing we have to realize. If it's not happening in the jungle where the virus is supposed to be, then what is actually causing the pandemic over here? In other presentations, we have explained many other toxicities that are causing these COVID symptoms right now. And some of it is the electrification of our environment, the serious electrification of our environment with the 5G technology. And there are other toxicities too, like chemtrails and all of that, which you will understand in other webinars of the summit. And right, so it's not even happening in the indigenous tribes. So at this critical point of time on the planet, they have won and we are losing. So we need to understand this. What have we done wrong to our environment that is manifesting something that is, everybody is scared to death of. This is my last slide. And by the same globalist corporations that operate as the United Nations now, this is a grand plan of saving everybody that is being put on our TVs and in presentations. Now, anybody who is a systems thinker, okay, will understand how fake this entire projection is. That means they will understand that all of these are symptoms and the resultants of not working out some core issues. And these are all symptoms of following a destructive model in the first place. Now, for example, I'll just tell you about this, right? Poverty. Poverty is the resultant of all these activities that we have done. Now, in the indigenous tribes, you will see no such problems exist. They have enough of barter and enough of things that they need to get all their food supply and everything. Okay, there is no hunger unless, I've seen communities where modern civilization has gone and invaded their lands, taken away so many of their natural resources, put them in a corner, and that's why they are suffering. Otherwise, earlier they had no big problem. Then good health is also is a natural outcome for them. We are all sick because we have followed all this hopeless food system and hopeless habits and hopeless products and all of that. So what is this? Gender equality and all the mental problems are also coming from this. People divided in the name of God, in the name of sex, and men and women given different roles. All these psychologies are operated through all of these, modern universities. Whereas they don't have such problems between men and women, children and youth, and senior citizens uh, in the indigenous, community. So well, yeah, climate action is the final name that you give when you have made a mess of all of it. So for me, these 17 goals are the 17 results of those kind of globalists who went away from nature, created their own labs, made their own sciences, destructive sciences that have damaged the entire planet. And now they are saying this is their way of saying that hey, there's a problem. We all got to work on it. So I think now that's what we are finally working at, and it's been about 200 years that humanity has suffered these hopeless sciences and innovations, destructive as they are in their nature. And we've understood those are the biggest mistakes that have been made on the planet. And that's why we're not only doing the New Earth Summit, but there are hundreds of other programs done by people who are feeling the pain and wanting to make this world a better place. And so last slide, I would still like to come back to uh, that same first slide of the indigenous tribes. They never made a mistake in the past. They are not making mistakes now, and they will never make a mistake in the future. And that's the biggest lesson that we have to learn from them. That you know they did not have to make this 17 goals problem because they don't have this problem in the first place. Uh, so yes, that's what I wanted to share. That if all of us understand and will work towards eco-friendly, self-sufficient, local abundant model that now Chandra Vikash will tell us about. That's the only future, the good future we can have. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl, for sharing your observations and insights with us. I will now pose my next question to Chandra Vikash ji. If you would like to first comment on what Daryl just presented, and after that, could you please speak about the UNDRIP 2007 declaration?
Thank you so much, Sophie, for the introduction, and thank you, Daryl, for the wonderful presentation. It was really, breathtaking, and I could listen on and on, though I had an eye on the time. It's already about 6:50, and I would like to leave ample time for Rahul Banerjee ji, who's such a luminary in the in the field of indigenous movement. He's been on the field. So I'll keep my presentation sweet and short and just stick to what I would call as the truth bombshell. I'm a truth warrior and I'm a truth practitioner. I mean, I love truth. Now that may seem, like kind of a exaggeration, like how much can you love truth? Because, sometimes it gets into trouble, or sometimes it can even be, threatening to your life, to your very existence. I love the truth because the United Nations and the current ongoing COVID saga is hiding some deeper truths from, humanity, from the human society. And I would like to focus just on that before I come to UNDRIP, which is a epochal declaration made by the United Nations and passed unanimously by the General Assembly in 2007. UNDRIP stands for United Nations Declaration for Rights of Indigenous People. But firstly, United Nations, has it been truthful? Or has it even been, suggestive about who the indigenous people are? Or for example, when I ask, n number of people, are you indigenous or are you non-indigenous? Nobody, absolutely nobody has a clear answer. So let me first unravel the secrets, the deeper secrets that the United Nations system is trying to hide when it talks about the word indigenous itself. So I'll now switch on to my presentation. So we're going to chart the road ahead for UNDRIP 2007 in a good 14 years, in 2021. Could COP26, which concludes day after tomorrow, mark a new beginning for an indigenous world order? So for the uninitiated, the COP26 is the United Nations Framework for Climate Change Convention. The Conference of Parties is meeting for the 26th time. So for 25 previous times, they have been indecisive on how to clear up the mess that has been created by the non-indigenous world order, which we call as modernity. So what does, so the flow of slides, is it clear, the slides, the visibility? Yeah. So who is indigenous? Lessons from COP26. Is indigenous an idea whose time has come? Because there's lots of buzz if you follow the COP26 proceedings. And if you would like to do after this session, please search for the keyword indigenous people, how they have been not given a good opportunity to share their views, and yet they have been highly vociferous, and they are likely to command the United Nations and the coterie of private club of bullies, the sovereign nation states, which is basically a post-colonialist world order, to come to an indigenous world order. So that's my open declaration on this session. UNDRIP, I'll tell you briefly about it. Education holds the key, because the whole chaos has been created, the whole mess has been created through telling us the wrong things and telling those lies 1,000 times, so that we start believing in them. And then what I likely see as a road ahead, that's another bombshell that I'm going to drop. So coming to who's indigenous, so I'd like your very careful attention, because lots of things you are going to see on the screen might be very different from the perceptions you have held so far. So firstly, in the Latin language of ecclesiastics and royalty of the time, the people of children of God, people or children of God, as Spaniards often refer to indigenous as los niños de la indios. So indigenous was actually referred to as children of God, which actually gives away that the conquistadors, riding on the doctrine of discovery, knew that they were the satanic tribes, they were the evil. So they knew who the children of God were. So I moved to several continents, to Japan, and there's a word called Tenjiku, which I discovered during Indo-Japan biennial global summit. It means heaven, and it also means India, like what we call as Dev Bhumi. The same in Chinese, although we talk about India, China being so hostile, China has a word called Tianzhu, which means India, which also means heaven. So China has always looked at India with lots of regard and lots of respect, till the time we were both misled into being hostile to each other, and the divide and rule game that's been going on for fairly long time. So we need to call the bluff on that. So I'll come to the bombshell. Indigenous from Proto-Indo-European. So what is Proto-Indo-European? It's by now well established that Sanskrit is the Proto-Indo-European language. Gene means give birth. So with derivatives, they're referring to procreation and familial and tribal groups. So essentially what also the current Shankaracharya of Puri, Swami Nishchalananda Saraswati ji, Jagat Guru Swami Nishchalananda Saraswati ji says is that Hindu is the common ancestry of all humans. And how do we know that? Go to the next para. In Sanskrit, the same word Hindu, which is used from the Latin, Old Latin, Proto-Indo-European, refers to drop of soma, also a term for the moon. And what is moon? Moon is the adhitev of man, which is from which the word manav, manu, and man originate. So Hindu is indigenous, and Hindu is same as human. It's the birthplace from where the cradle from where the human species originates, and where else is it corroborated? So we walk to Mid East, to Arabian literature. And what do the Arab believe? Please look carefully. Generally, even educated people are often seen saying that when Muslims came to the country from outside, they changed Sindhu to Hindu because in their language, S was replaced by H. And one example that's given is that Sapta for week is called as Hafta. While that's true, so this from Alama Sayyid Abdullah Tariq ji, who's the founder of Word. So we have written a paper together called Who is Hindu? So his paper says they started calling the people on the side of Indus River as Hindus and named the country as Hindustan. The grounds for this much discussed explanation are very weak. How do we know that? The week is called Hafta in Persian, but Samudra, the ocean, in Sanskrit or Hindi is not called Hamudra. Satya is not called Hatya. Somnath was not called Homnath. So by the same logic of S being replaced by H, this doesn't consistently. And then we come to a word called Hinda, which the Arabs used for beautiful women. So it all points to very interesting etymology of the word indigenous, linking towards the word Hindu and Indian. So who's this lady? I met her at a UN summit. Her name is Hindu Amarrao Abraham. And please read her credentials carefully. She is an indigenous woman from a pastoral tribe in Chad. The United Nations cannot dispute that. And she's also one of the founders of the Association of Indigenous Women and Peoples of Chad, a group fighting to defend the environment and the right of indigenous people. So essentially, why did non-indigenous need to get into the picture? Why does United Nations need to create such a labyrinthine tapestry of lies and deceit and hoaxes to hide, to bluff and to mislead us to believe that only 370 million people, and though you can see in the fine print, I have underlined in red 370 million people. The population of human beings on earth is 7.8 billion people. How come, according to the United Nations, a vast majority of us are non-indigenous? We don't trace our roots to this earth. So I'll just elaborate on the point that the United Nations is trying to hide from the fact sheet provided publicly by the United Nations itself. So it says firstly 370 million in 70 countries, doesn't even refer to Asia and Africa, which as Pangaea, as Gondwana land is known as to be the cradle of human civilization. The new arrivals later became dominant through conquest, occupation, settlement of the other means. The Aryan occupation theory, Aryan invasion theory has been completely ridiculed and completely been deconstructed. There is no the migration of people even within the indigenous tribes in India. For example, I come from my native state is Jharkhand. Rahul Da is nodding his head. I can very clearly see that, but let me explicitly point out what I mean. The Orao tribe, which is considered indigenous, actually means wanderer. Their origin is in Kud in Karnataka. So if someone can migrate from Karnataka to northeast in Jharkhand, why can't people, human, like bees, like eagles, like so many migratory species have been on the move? That doesn't mean that they lose their indigeneity. You lose your indigeneity according to the United Nations itself when you stop following the geoclimatic conditions and accordingly your what's called ownership of Jal, Jungle, Zameen, Jan, Janwar, what's called the commons, the land, the forests, the water reserves, the livestock, the skill sets, as long as you follow the local practices and what Daryl so beautifully explicates as localization, where you don't need more transportation means like fossil fuel driven vehicles. You have more community. You have most of the products being created by the community itself that the community needs. So only some residual stuff is traded. So similarly, if you look at the definition of the indigenous, firstly, the United Nations very clearly says that there is no official definition of the word indigenous. So it leaves it to a self-declaration, self-identification. So, and the biggest block that has been left out is the Hindus. So the Hindus, according to it, if we were to go by its own definition, that the outside the settlers have populated lands like America, like Canada, like Australia, and they have outnumbered the indigenous. But India is the country where the indigenous people continue to be in large majority. But the United Nations very deviously, very deceptively, very cunningly stops to recognize Hindus as indigenous. And now I'll come closer to the bombshell. But before that, please read carefully what the United Nations wants to talk on the question of identity. According to the UN, the most fruitful approach to identity, rather than define indigenous people, is based on fundamental criterion of self-identification as underlined in a number of human rights documents. The term indigenous has prevailed as a generic term for many years in some countries. It doesn't go to the roots which are publicly available, as I have etymologically pointed out. First peoples, First Nations, Aboriginals, ethnic groups, Adivasis, Janjatis. But somehow it wants to only identify the disadvantaged, the underprivileged, the great unwashed in its own definition. But people, the indigenous people who have stood the brunt, borne the brunt of colonialism and still hold their head high, who can still afford or can qualify for a good quality of life, are not identified as indigenous. You have to be, very wretched, very, poor and deprived to qualify as indigenous. These are all, colonialistic hoodwinking. These are all dirty tricks which we need to identify and we need to call the bluff. So in the next para in the UN fact sheet, it talks about indigenous people as holders of unique languages. So there's lots of trust and parry, knowledge systems and beliefs. They possess invaluable knowledge of practices for the sustainable management of natural resources. They have a special relation to and use of their traditional land. Their ancestral land has a fundamental importance for their collective physical and cultural survival as peoples. Indigenous peoples hold their own diverse concepts of development based on their traditional values, visions, needs, and priorities. And no less than Noam Chomsky, one of the world's leading thinker, has gone on record saying that the world needs to come back to the indigenous ways of life if humanity has any chance to survive. And this has been seconded by people like Antonio Guterres, who in the second term as Secretary General is a very influential person. But why does Mr. Antonio Guterres keep mincing his words and keep, hiding the truth? The last slide on the UN fact sheet, political participation. Very clearly, UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration for Rights of Indigenous People, to which all the major countries, including United States of America, China, Russia, India, Indonesia, all of them are signatories. It very clearly says that if your nation states, acknowledging that these are post-colonialist structures, if they don't recognize your political identity, your cultural identity, your right to education, traditional education, your right to traditional justice system, your right to traditional healthcare system, which Darryl focuses on, traditional farming system, which Rahul Banerjee focuses on, If you're denied those rights, you can call for political independence. You can first of all get registered yourself at the UNPO, which is a UN body called Unrepresented Nations and People Organization. So there are pathways which lead us to understand and define where we are and where we want to go. The world that we truly care about, a healthy, harmonious, happy, a blissful, joyous world that we all owe to our children. One of the very popular indigenous saying and one of my mantras, it says that we don't borrow the planet from our forefathers. We don't inherit the planet from our forefathers. We borrow it from our children. So there is a sense of indebtedness, and the same sense that is conveyed by the ancient Indian notion of Pitri Rin, that we have to defend our children. And today, with the COVID vaccine threat, which is untested, which is emergency use approval, which is actually, according to Professor Peter Doshi from British Medical Journal, not a vaccine, it's a drug. And a drug cannot be administered by a mandate to everyone under the argument that your protection lies because you need to take the drug to protect me even after I've taken that drug. And the truth is, it's a bioweapon. The much bigger truth bombshell that I'm going to present before you, that most people are unaware of, what is called willful blindness or willful ignorance, is that the word indigenous is not only derived from the word Hindu, but Hindu and indigenous are actually synonyms. They are interchangeable. Hindu is the classical, cosmopolitan, and cosmological character of the global indigenous. Even if you look at modern physics trajectory, they're all leading to where the Rig Veda has been telling us. You just read the modern physicists. The cosmopolitan character. We were neither liberal nor conservative. We were truly cosmopolitan. We are classical. We have classical music. We have classical architecture. And yet, and this is the peak of civilization. We didn't advance with the European Renaissance. Actually, European Renaissance was a big bluff. It actually started the age of darkness by replacing light with darkness, by replacing truth with a bunch of lies. And who says that? Before I come to the next section, I would like to refer to a book by Walter Benjamin called Illuminations. It's a wonderful book with a foreword by Hannah Arendt, who's one of the most influential philosopher thinkers of our times. Even there's a movie under the name of Hannah Arendt. Now, what Walter Benjamin points out in one of his essays in the book Illuminations is that the decline of human civilization doesn't start with fossil fuels. It actually predates much before. It starts with inventions like mechanical clock, which disconnect human beings from their cosmic connections. Humans were spiritually so evolved that even if they were in deep seas, they could look at the moons and the stars and they could know where they are even in the night. So there was a GPS that was so inherent, so intrinsic, so well wired. We had telepathy. It was not just when there was less noise, when this electromagnetic fog was not there, when there was so much, when the electromagnetic field of Earth was in its natural balance. With certain meditation practices, you could actually communicate with people who are far. And this is how we talk about the narration by Sanjay in Mahabharata to Dhritarashtra. So all these technologies, lots of things which were ridiculed as tantra, people could become smaller, people could become larger. So there was lots of possibilities, lots of technologies, lots of techniques that were lost, and the peak civilization has further declined. And now I'll come to the very current topic of COP26, the United Nations Climate Change Conference that's going on in Glasgow, which is co-hosted by Britain and Italy. It has 4 goals, and all the 4 goals are achieved by returning or rather moving forward in a cyclical way to the indigenous world order. This is what the indigenous leaders at the United Nations conference who are attending there want to tell the world. Let this be very clear, very emphatic that all the goals of COP26, the first goal being secure global net zero by mid-century and keep 1.5 degrees within reach. This is again a blatant lie. We have already crossed almost 1.5 degrees at nearly about 415 ppm greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere. Rather, if we wait till mid-century, the chapter will be all over, because by then the temperature will have risen up to about 4 degrees centigrade. So we need to get to net zero by 2030 at the latest. Even that is a little risk. So how we can get there? By reverting to what Darryl described so eloquently, so beautifully as the indigenous way of life in so many pictures. So I'll not go to the details, you can go through. The second, adapt to protect communities and natural habitats. This is exactly playing on the turf of returning to indigenous ways of life. But where is the word indigenous here? Why is United Nations, which is a club of Euro-Western universalists, the Cartesian theorists whose compartmentalization, mechanistic, reductionistic approach with its fatal flaws has brought us to this brink of disaster, why is it trying to hide that the world needs to go indigenous, that the European colonialists, they need to give up their control freak psychotic behavior and come to the senses? They need to be put in rehab. We are willing to provide the services, caregiving services, distress response services. Our partner organization, World Organization for Religions and Knowledge, has been doing it, doing lots of groundwork. We would like to expand our services to all over the world. I wrote a paper about 10 years back. Daryl, you may be interested to read that. It's called the derailment of Western civilization. Does it need a bailout? And I very emphatically said 10 years back that it doesn't need a bailout. It's a psychotic, neurotic, it's basically about juvenile delinquency gone, overboard. So it needs rehab, it needs care, and it needs what's called tough love. It needs, both carrot and stick. So coming to the next point of goal number 3, mobilize finance. Now, this is the, again, one of the big lies being hidden. Modern finance is no different from criminal fraud. The way digital money is being printed, they have completely debauched the currencies of the world, controlled by the reserve banks of various countries and by the IMF, the World Bank, and the United Nations system. And whichever head of state tries to challenge the reserve banking system is threatened, and many of them have been killed. But how many can they kill? How many can they, really muzzle the voices? We, through Gaia Earth Sansad, propose a global currency which will be truly controlled by the people as a democratic representative world body. So we don't need the US dollars, we don't need the Chinese won, we don't need the Japanese yen, we don't need the British pound. We just need a single currency, and we need localized currencies which could be just food, grains as currency. Anna is also called as mudra, which is also the word for money. So my point very clearly is that rather than talk about mobilizing finance, we should talk about completely dissolving the current US dollar hegemony on the financial system, and we should talk about a new global currency which is truly transparent. It is accountability is there, and it is equitably distributed, controlled by people of the world through the Gaia Earth Sansad structure, which I'll come to perhaps in a later session. And the last point they make is, an apple pie statement: work together to deliver. we've been going overboard. We've been inviting. We believe in Atithi Devo Bhava. All indigenous communities, not just in India. And we want them to come to the table for a discussion. We want to understand what their problems are, even if these are physical problems with their health, with their mental problems, with their psychotic disorders, their neurotic disorders, or there are spiritual disorders. We are, as ancient civilizations, as indigenous people with long memories, with lots of elderly wisdom, are capable of solving the most severe psychotic, neurotic, spiritual disorders that the Euro-Western world seems to be facing, rather than thrusting their, mania on rest of the world and the shit hits the ceiling fan. Let us come to senses and let us accept that there is a certain madness without any method that the Euro-Western universalist world order wants to impose on rest of us. And let us forget about Paris. Let's, in another 2 days in Glasgow, let's have a clear declaration that we want indigenous world order. That's the way forward. Just another bombshell. The person by the name of Christopher Columbus. Shall I read it out or is it visible? Can you read it out? The real reason Christopher Columbus was sailing the ocean blue was because he raped a 13-year-old daughter of a Spanish duchess. Now, these are all validated from credible sources. They couldn't kill him without angering the Italian court. So Queen Isabella just sent him on a mission they didn't think he would return from. It is also on public record that he rewarded his soldiers by giving them native to rape and to eat. They were cannibals, they were murderers, they were rapists, plunderers. That's the foundation of the modern civilization. And the European Renaissance did nothing to discard and disown the doctrine of discovery. They only tried to cover it up by lots of fanciful philosophies, the Hegels and the Nietzsche and the Immanuel Kant. They all of that, like the Lady Macbeth in the novel, Shakespearean novel Macbeth. All the perfumes of Arabia wouldn't sweeten this little hand. They have bloods on their hand. They are mass murderers. So why this problem has so I'll give a philosophical spiritual construct that why we came from indigenous world order through modernization, quote unquote, to the neo-colonialist, which is the non-indigenous world order. And what's the danger ahead if we go on the straight line of the doctrine of discovery? So we actually need to go accept the cyclicality and need to undo the excesses of modernization. We can't directly jump to indigenous world order because the ecosystems that sustain the indigenous way of life have been damaged and put in great disrepair. We will need to use the 5Gs for some more time. We will need to use the automobiles, the aircrafts, lots of technologies, the computing power, lots of technologies to, but with a moral authority that this is only to repair the damage caused to the natural indigenous ecosystems. So the cradle to grave Euro-Western universalism is dead with the COVID pandemic. And that was my announcement in March 2020 in a series of 3 articles published by Counterview, which you can refer to there. So enormously, so this is a very famous line by from the Journal of Retailing by Victor Lebo. I'll just read it out. It says, our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction, our ego satisfaction in consumption. We need things consumed, burned up, worn out, replaced, and discarded at an ever-increasing rate. And this got integrated into the GDP growth model. And then they launched the degrowth revolution. So all this, juvenile delinquency is, by these nutcases is very interesting, is very, like a thriller, like a psycho thriller, unfolding over centuries for a keen observer, who is not attached. So in 2017, they made a proclamation, so which is gone now. So that if we only have 3 years left to prevent a climate disaster, and please look at the curve for the last 3 years, their carbon emissions has only been going over the top. They have failed the Paris Accord. They have failed the all the 1 minute. So I think I'll leave the presentation right here and maybe for a further session. And I'll come back to my point, which is very clearly that the indigenous world order is an idea whose time has come. We must prepare ourselves and the world to come to terms with the new reality of the fact that what COVID pandemic really indicates that we need to not exactly start mimicking the way the indigenous tribes lived, because that's simply not possible. That's not practically possible. We need to create chart new pathways to get there, or maybe do better. Certainly, we have lots of lessons from, nothing goes in vain. So we have lots of important lessons from last 500 years of even the age of darkness, the age of imperialism, the age of consumerism. First they talk about consumer being the king. Now the consumer is the patient, and they're trying to, bleed the patient either, to become loyal customers. So from being the king, the customer is now the patient of the big pharma, which I call as the big Dharma, controlled by the World Harassment Organization, which is all controlled by United Nations. So I'll just stop in the tracks here. I think I've shared lots of food for thought, and I think by mulling over, by manthan on these ideas, we'll certainly find a way out of this COVID conundrum. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra Vikash ji, for opening our eyes through your research and observations on this topic, and for expanding the meaning of the word indigenous for us. Thank you so much for that. I will now direct my next question to Rahul ji. Could you please share with us your experience with the indigenous people and also your views on the way forward?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for asking me to participate in this webinar. So I come from an urban background, and then for various reasons I decided that I would like to spend my time among the Adivasis, and I ended up among the Gil Adivasis in Madhya Pradesh. But when I came there, because I come from a technical background, technological background, I thought I would, I had some preset ideas about what the problems are and how they are to be solved. So, but after coming there, after coming to live among the Adivasis, I realized that actually they don't have any problems. The problems are all in our minds, that we want to develop this world in a particular way and we want them to participate in that. And since they are not able to do, we think they are in problem and we have to help them to overcome that problem. But I was very quickly disabused of that, and I came to realize that they have a very good understanding of how to live with nature, and they have been living with nature for centuries together. So as Chandra Vikash was saying, that initially Indians, we were all indigenous, but even if our roots were indigenous, over the years, over the centuries, we shifted away. We drifted away from what was the original indigenous, the Vedic times or even before that, whatever was there, we drifted away from that. And we went to a centralized system, as Darryl was mentioning, that we have a centralized economic system. And that is what we started adopting. But some people remain. So without going into this whole debate about who is indigenous and who is not, as Chandra Vikash also mentioned, that there are some ways, and Daryl also mentioned, that there are some ways of life. So I will concentrate on one particular thing that these people, the Bhil Adivasis, do very well, and that is soil, water, and forest conservation, which is extremely important. I will just stick to the situation in India. We won't go over to the whole world. India, we are now facing severe water stress. We are also facing severe soil stress. I mean, the soils have been denuded. And we are also having, deforestation. These are the three problems. These are the three main problems that that are, creating problems for the whole of the country, not just the Adivasis who stay close to nature, who stay close to the forests. So the Adivasis, I found out they have this traditional system. They are called. It's called Dhas. The name. It's a cultural system called Dhas, after which our organization, one of our organizations, is named. So the Dhas is that the whole community comes together, and they work on various things, on forest conservation, serving the forests, and then for soil conservation, because this area where we work, where I mainly work, is in the Vindhya Hills. So that's just next to the Narmada River. So it's very hilly area. So there you have to do soil conservation. If you don't do soil conservation, then your farms are going to get washed away. So that what all this, whether it is forest conservation, soil conservation, or water conservation, they have very good practices for irrigation. They exploit the terrain, and they direct water by creating weirs on the streams and then directing the water to their fields. And it requires tremendous ingenuity to do that. Because they don't have, like we as civil engineers, I'm a civil engineer, we as civil engineers use various instruments, dumpy levels and various other instruments, chaining and all that, to calculate the gradient and how to divert water and all that. But they don't have all that. Intuitively, they find out exactly where to build the weir and how to divert the water and all that. And all these things, apart from ingenuity, it requires community work. Everybody has to work together, because one person can't do this work, whether it's soil, water, or forest conservation. And this was there in them right from beginning. So the problem that then when we discussed, the problem was that these traditional methods, they were being eroded by the modern, so-called modern market economy is eroding this system. And that is why the problem is being created, not because that they do not have the knowledge or the methods to have a more nature-friendly system, which is conservative of nature, but that the modern system is impeding that. So our work was to try and stop the modern system from impeding. So revive these traditions and let them, and we succeeded in a very small area in Alirajpur district. We succeeded in doing that, and people came together and did a lot of work, and even today it is visible there that the work they have done. And of course, I learned from that. So what Daryl is saying, that we have to have a localized economy where everybody gets together, and the production and the distribution and the consumption, that takes place in a local system, which is possible, which is how it was earlier, before the centralized systems came in, and then because of profit, so I just wrote in that somebody was saying that when when this thing happened, this change. So I was saying that it changed with the coming of gunpowder and cannons, So once gunpowder came and cannons came, then you could have these imperial navies going and, overrunning all of the places. They overran Africa and America very fast. But in India, they had to do it over 200, 250 years. The Portuguese Vasco da Gama came here in the early 16th century, 1498, 1500. And there's this Battle of Dew, which is I don't know how many of you know about this. Battle of Dew in 1508, where the Portuguese navy overcame the combined navies of the Arab states, the Arab people, the Gujarat Mamluk dynasty there, and the Zamorin in Cochin, and they were supported by the Ottoman Empire and the Venetian merchants, because if their trade was being affected by the Portuguese, but the Portuguese navy won that battle. And as a consequence, then we had this whole imperialism, and then it follows with industrial revolution and everything. So the thing is that we have to go back to that kind of a sort of system where you have communities doing together. What they will do in the community, as Chandra said, that we can't actually go back totally. But whatever is decided, that has to be done, keeping two things in mind. One is sustainability, which is very important. That we can't harm nature beyond a point. And the other is equity. This whole thing of this huge differences that are there now. That some people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and all that, they have billions of dollars, and they're aggressive about it. When the US government, Biden is saying that you have to tax these people, Elon Musk is aggressive about it. That I'm creating wealth. Why should you tax me? I mean, that is and as you all know, probably that today, if you see the whole turnover of the world, that 95% of the turnover is in stocks and currencies, which is totally speculative. There is no productive, and the productive part, which is actually producing food and producing stuff, even producing cars, that part, that is just 5% of the economy. And that 95%, they are the people who are controlling this whole world. So this is a pathology. This is the pathology that has given rise to COVID, and it will give rise to various other things. So because everybody else before me has already elaborated the whole thing, so I will just say that there are these set of people all over the world, in India and elsewhere also, who know how to live close to nature and who know how to cooperate. That is the main thing, that we must all cooperate to save this world and save ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul Ji, for sharing your experiences with the indigenous people and explaining to us, based on your experience, how we may move forward. So now I'd like to ask the audience to direct their questions into the Q&A box so that I can ask the panelists.
Yeah, so commenting on Rahul Banerjee's talk, I'd like to comment that indigenous is not just about getting there where we were. It's the journey, and we must soak in the joy and bliss of how this journey unfolds, from wherever we are at present. So rather than complaining, and rather than getting very depressed and disillusioned by all the bells and whistles of modernity all around, we would rather use them as tools. We would rather ingeniously use them as kind of bridges to get there. And in that, I like to talk about the invention of the bicycle. Though there are texts that it is almost 4,000 years old. I mean, there were bicycles made of bamboo, but the modern bicycle, and this is the brighter side of Europe, that they have really taken the cycling culture very seriously. And you have even heads of state, even the royalty in several countries in Europe, which has bicycle as their royal cavalcade. Whereas in India, we tend to look at the bicycle as either a poor man's mode of commuting or as a rich man's mode of recreation. So it is not in a utility mode. Our cities, our towns, even villages are not designed for safe and friendly cycling. So that's one important slide that I didn't have time, maybe in the next opportunity, which I talk about, that we landed into COVID culture and onward to human extinction, just because we didn't give up, we didn't question the car culture, which is the big symbolism of non-indigenous modernity. So that's one point I'd like to make on Rahul Banerjee's thought, that it's not about getting exactly to the pristine. Yeah, definitely we would like to get there, but let us soak in the pleasures, the bliss and joy of wherever we are, and return, or rather than moving forward to a higher level.
Thank you, Chandra Vikashji. We have our next question, which is probably about the next level. Vishwa would like to know, what is the next step for a person who lives in the city, someone trying to be a cosmopolitan?
So I would like to comment on that first. There are one is one answer that I will give, and the second, I would like to direct it to Chandra Vikashji. The proposal or the what I have been talking about is something similar to what I did 10 years back. We all know right now that COVID is most raging in the cities, and people are there with such panic and without jobs and all of that. So a very good time would be to go back to your village, to your ancestral place, where the water is still good, where the air is still good, where you can get natural food. And since all the systems on the planet are changing now, you see, healthcare system and money system and food system, go back to your ancestral village and talk to the people and start, maybe a group of you can do it together like a picnic. Go back to the village and start, doing things over there. All the new green technologies. Please watch all the videos of the New Earth Summit on our this website, the newearthsummit.com. First, you look at the 2019. There are about 30 webinars over there. No, they were done physically actually, yes. So there are 30 videos of all the presentations on health, food, farming, and environment. Because all of these are building up what we are talking about, a decentralized system by the people, for the people, with localized goods and services, with health, education, and all of that, a complete system. So I am working along with Mr. Chandra Vikash and work and Project Youth Parivartan also, where we are creating this model of self-sufficient states, where by the people, for the people. And it's a very good and proactive movement. And because if people start making their own states self-sufficient, and we create committees like how we were doing yesterday on our talk with the Integrative Natural Medicine Committee, or we can also have a natural food and farming committee or a natural homes and architecture committee. If we set up, and this is what some of our topics on this summit are, so please be with us in this third year also of the summit to understand all of this. So when people start making committees, get together, put in good ideas, they can do a lot of work in their locality, society, and in their state. And of course, it's going to be welcomed by the government. You see, if we do their work, they will have lesser work. So at the center, the center in Delhi will have much lesser problems, because if we take care of ourselves. So of course, all whatever taxes, and every state is not so independent in the way it is set up now. Goa doesn't have its own, power generation. So we take power from another state. So all those exchanges will go on. But from our asset base, yeah, whatever we have in our locality, we should try and be as self-sufficient as we can. So that is my first, advice. And I just want to go back to my presentation because I added a couple of slides. Okay, so when I'm saying go back to a village and do this, or the eco village that we are setting up in Goa, if anybody is interested in the design, please get in touch with me. I will send you a 6-page PDF of the design, and you'll see it's amazing. And where are we heading? I'm going to show you 3 pictures, okay, of a community that I have been in touch with since 2012. They had presented at the First World Parliament on Spirituality also. Okay, this is the community is called Damanhur, and you will get these pictures and the entire details on their website, damanhur.org. I will put it in the chat box. So this is an aerial view of what they've done. So very eco-friendly, natural, spiritual community with amazing sciences. So please, those of you who have not understood what permaculture is, please Google the topic and get into it. It's all the ways of designing natural self-sufficient systems from the assets that you have in your space. Okay, so as you can see this, it looks so beautiful, so natural, easy flowing, and uh, here is another slide. One of the rooms inside. You can see this is like an art room, which is like a dance room. So all things are natural. These places are so beautiful. So even if we do natural materials, okay, we can create beautiful spaces. This is also like a meditation room and a room for contemplation. So literally these three pictures will show you that almost you are in heaven. You see. So this is our right. This is what we can do and we must do. And this is the kind of future we can have. So we should all look forward to it. To because there is not so much that you can do natural in a concrete jungle. So better to go to a greenfield place and so like I suggested, look at the videos of the New Earth Summit of 2019, 2020, and from tomorrow, the day after, we'll start uploading all the recordings of 2021. So let that be your research base, your idea base. And in all of the previous sessions, we have given the contact details of all our panelists. They all come, they are domain experts who come from a place of implementation. They're not people just from universities who talk theory and all of that. No, I have taken care to see that none of the panelists come from that place, because converting theory into practical reality that serves people, the land, and the planet is a very deep science. Now, I mean, it's become a complicated science only because of all these fake, university sciences that have, all these universities that have come in. Otherwise, like Rahul ji was mentioning, that the indigenous people are, they have their complete body of knowledge. It's so simple, and they know what to do, and we don't have anything that we can teach them. So that's one good point, that you will see that it is simple, it is organic. When you really, take the decision to go natural, you will have a lot of support. And of course, once you go in your village, there's traditional wisdom in the village. At one point of time of our eco community design, people were talking of a lot about the internet and all of that. You see, we should need internet for education, this, that, and so many things. But I just one day in our meeting of our core members, I just said that I'm bringing people into this community with complete knowledge. Physical people with complete knowledge will build this community. I don't need any research from the internet. They've done the last 30 years of their life, they've done all that research. And this community will have children, and they'll pass on that living knowledge to the next generation. So please, I do not need the internet to build this community of any of the sciences. Okay, then we went step by step. Okay, why do you need a computer? Why do you need a mobile phone and all that? And finally, when I resolved all their problems with the self-sufficiency from the community, the only valid reason came that I would like to talk to my father or my mother who's in a different country. I would like to just communicate. And that was the only valid reason that they needed, okay, internet. So yes, so things are simpler, can be more beautiful, and we've been taken down a wrong track for the last 200 years. What are not problems have been made our biggest problems, and they are those 17 SDGs of the United Nations. Okay, so anyway, if they have realized it's their mistake and they're calling all of us to participate and solve it, yes, we will. But there's an organic structure. Understand what systems integration is and what are core problems, and work on those. And then all of these, excess of these 17 will come down. I've just identified that there are only 4, 5 real problems. If you work on them, then all of the rest 17, the cookie crumbles. So this you will have this experience when you go to the village and you start using indigenous knowledge, culture, and their participation. They will tell you how to set up and build a new earth. And of course, the latest ideas and all will come from New Earth Summit and any other such conferences of people across the globe who are innovators, going green, local, and decentralized. The second part of that, which I mentioned that I would ask Chandra Vikash to elaborate on. So I give this route of, because I have this idea that there's a lot more work, and I said this concrete jungle is a graveyard of humanity. So I'm telling people go to some other place and do it. Okay, but Chandra Vikash ji, maybe in his later presentations, he's got some techniques of saving the lives of some people who are in the city. So if you would like to, not write them right off the cities totally like me, he's done some wonderful work and innovation in that. Chandra Vikash ji, could you please share?
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you, Vishwa for asking that very pertinent question. What do we do in the cities? And unlike Daryl, who left Mumbai to move to his ancestral village, I stay very much in the heart of the city in Delhi National Capital Region, and I really have no complaints. That's because I could arrive at the deeper simplicity of how to live in joy and bliss in the city itself. When you don't have a choice to go back. I mean, ideally we would all like to go to our ancestral villages if we had that choice, maybe. But anyway, if you are, let's say stuck in the city, how to make the best of it? So the deeper simplicity that I arrived at is that start practicing what you're being told. So I gave up the motor car, though we were compelled to buy that one car, which we have for about 17 years, in a place where we had 2 children and we had no other public transport. So that was the only time. But most of my work, the commute, errands and meetings, all happen on the bicycle in a radius of 15 kilometers around. So when I have to go to further places, I take them to the metro station, park my bicycle there and take. Similarly, not eating, sugar. There was a 1956 book on sugar called Pure, White and Deadly that was, kind of banned by the, the junk food industry. The book was banned. Similarly, there was a book called Devil in the Milk on the A1 milk, which has this beta-casomorphin from New Zealand, which was banned. So you are only humans are only supposed to take A2 milk, which doesn't have that morphine in the tropical and temperate regions. So similarly, refined oil. Refined oil is not oil; it is just some colored liquid. So doing whole wheat flours, more of vegetables, more of fruits, and trying to move towards the organic, to the raw, to the pure, to the natural practices has meant that despite a 20-year of family life, we have almost made 0 medical bills. 0 means 0, except for some accidental injuries somewhere, some lapses on our own part. Now, it's all possible that, and to do that at a larger scale, I came up with this model called what Sophie pronounced as LACE model. It's the LACE model. And at the spiritual level, I like to talk about how to move from the emperor's clothes of lies, deceit, and hoaxes to the naked truth. So we need to disrobe, and that's the interesting, titillating bit of the LACE Gaia model. What LACE essentially stands for is localized abundance and circular economy, which Daryl so beautifully shared that's exactly how the indigenous people, the indigenous ways of life were designed. I'm saying that they were designed. Today, we don't talk about village master plans, but if you look at Samrangya Samhita, Samrangya Shastra, there is a blueprint for every village, for every city of how much, built up area should be there. There should be only 4-storied buildings. So without any elevators, there should be farming land, there should be pasture land, there should be forests. They all make the village abundant, not just self-sufficient. And almost 95% of this total land area under the master plan is forests. Then you have space for deep forests. So coming to Vishwa Saha's question that what do we do in the city? we must start practicing what I call as converting brownfields to green fields and the green fields to deeper green fields. That's the trajectory we need to take in the next 500 years. So one of the tenets that I learned from an indigenous elderly wise person is that last 500 years were about deforestation, and the next 500 years, almost around this time, is a turning around where humans will be more and more inclined towards afforestation and more of native forestry. So in the LACE model, which is a 10 stack model, 5 verticals and 5 horizontals. So very quickly, it's about abundant food, abundant water, zero to waste, zero to landfill, waste to wealth. So when you create a space within the community and when you create time within the community, you don't have to deal with waste. You don't have to mix it up and then segregate it. You can simply use everything that you don't need inside the household as a raw material, as what Peter Senji in a post-industrial revolution paper talks about as technical nutrients. So every waste is kind of a technical nutrient, whether it's paper, whether it's plastic, whether it's vegetable leftovers, whether it's wood, whether it's metal. So there's no concept of, and you stop using whatever is biohazardous. So no diapers, no napkins, all have their natural alternatives, which are biodegradable. So one of the beautiful principles of indigenous societies has been that there is no concept of garbage or landfill. There are no, mountain of garbages in the indigenous communities. They're all cradle to cradle. They're not cradle to grave as modern non-indigenous societies are. So food, water, zero to landfill, waste to wealth. Fourth is eco-friendly transportation. So I mentioned about bicycle, ultra-light electric rickshaws with some solar panel for some of the residual needs. Most of the localization takes care of you don't need to travel at all. You are getting things at a walkable or cyclable distance, or maybe some cycle carts. The fifth is eco-friendly housing. Make material with using indigenous design of the geoclimatic conditions of that particular area wherever you are staying. Like Rahul Banerjee's house, if you go visit in Indore, it's already an off-the-grid house. It doesn't need water from outside. It doesn't need electricity from outside. And it's a beautifully designed, which I had a team to visit, a delegation to visit his house. So the 5 horizontals, these are the 5 verticals. The 5 horizontals are holistic education, which is very, very important because we need to unlearn. We need to unwind all the junk, all the misleading and mischievous and malicious thoughts and ideas and facts that have been planted in our minds, in our collective psyche. We need to unwind. So holistic education is very important, and to understand what possible alternatives are there to move to a higher level, to a higher ground, physically, materially, mentally, as well as spiritually and beyond. So next is holistic health, which Darryl and Jagannath Chatterjee and Dr. Madhuri Patil in our group and so many other people are master practitioners of. We need to learn from them. We don't need to invest 95% of our country's budget, for example, in India, on allopathy, but on integrated medicines, on holistic health practices. And that will be a game changer. We want healthy people. We don't want sick people and then a series of vaccines, which are actually drugs or bioweapons to actually finish them off. We don't want to turn our demographic dividend into demographic liability. So very quickly, the third point is holistic energy. We need to draw energy from our inner consciousness as well as connect with the cosmic energy cycles, the sun, the moon, the stars. They're full of energy. We can directly draw energy from them. So we only need maybe fossil fuel electricity 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening, or maybe we need some solar panels, because even they consume lots of water. They also create lots of junk. So holistic energy is the third horizontal. Then fourth is distress response and communal harmony, which was a session a few days back on the New Earth Summit, which is very important because we need to immediately address elderly people, vulnerable people, underprivileged people, people who are marginalized. We need to address their pain points and find a mitigation immediately. And the fifth is spiritual, the awakening of understanding that we are not the body, we are not the mind, we are the spirit, we are the soul. And through this Lace Gaia model, and then this is the community intervention. Then we have a geopolitical intervention called Gaia Earth Sansad, which talks about replacing the United Nations by 5th of June 2022. Please mark this date, and this is only possible with all our collective participation. The United Nations has failed its own charter in the past 75 or now 76 years. And Antonio Guterres' tweets are enough proof that there is so much frustration, there is so much disillusionment within the UN officials themselves with the bully sovereign nation states. So we need a more democratic structure of eco-anarchies or community states at the bottom rung, which are self-sufficient and abundant, which control their Jal Jungle Zameen Jan Janwar with a population maybe not exceeding 2 million or 20 lakhs. Then we have a structure called sub-region, which is about 100 million, which is about 78 such sub-regions called Community of Nation States, which is a cluster of smaller nation states at present, or a cluster of provinces or even districts for in the case of larger countries, monolith countries like China, India, Indonesia, United States, Brazil, etc., Russia. Then we have at the top, we have a truly representative and democratic world body, which initially is selected through a transparent and objective and accountable process. And by 5th of June, we have worldwide elections for the positions of Gaia Earth Sansad to create an executive council there, which will create a more indigenous mandate for how to create pathways. And this indigenous is not just one monolithic, like Susan Raj in yesterday's session, she talked about that there's no one world order. It's actually the beauty of diversity. The diversity is the elixir of life. We need a billion world orders in small communities, their own, what is called Bhasha, Bhusha, Bhavan, Bhojan, Bhavan. Their food, their clothing, their dialects, their songs, their dances. So all that, repertoire, the kaleidoscope, that's what makes Earth, this little green blue planet, so beautiful that all indigenous people call as our mother. So that's the spiritual level, that's awakening. And I can tell you that there's only a bolder, beautiful, and braver world to look forward to. Forget about what these COVID peddlers or the big pharmaceutical companies with their mercenary interests. They're actually committing suicide. Let them die off and get buried. We will create a phoenix of a new civilization, a new march that will take us to higher levels of health, harmony, and happiness. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra Vikash ji.
Yes, I would just also mention that yes, Chandra Vikash ji, first thank you for that very inspiring delivery with a lot of details for our audience. And related to that, I just saw 3 questions because we are going to out of time. So clubbing 3 questions. One is a comment that world leaders nowadays working on Agenda 2030, followed by New World Order, globalist. Then second, are world leaders who are working on Agenda 2030, following the New World Order. And third is, what is the possibility of indigenous world order? What is the time frame for this? How is New World Order different from indigenous world order? I think all of those questions have been answered by Chandra Vikash ji right now. So we have these globalists who will always work on their plan, and nothing can ever come out of it except centralized, controlled, destructive and dominating, models. So we are, and people of the world right now are already fed up of all of this. they've seen the repercussions. That's why there are so many rallies and protests all across the world, and people are pushing against it. So do remain in touch with us. Now we will be having a meet in Delhi sometime, next month. And those who are seriously interested, please remain in touch with Chandra Vikash ji and with me, and we will connect you. We will invite you if you want to see the formation of this integrated system, and not only the operational system but the world body also, on how. And we would really like, because we are working with an open laboratory, because by the people for the people, and it's not this closed business model. So so that's, it doesn't matter what their names are, globalist, new world order, and all of that. People are creating their own design and their own collaborative model. And yes, like Chandra Vikash ji said, the idea is to make every place self-sufficient, and so people can enjoy all of their facilities, products, services, cultures, and all locally. So that's a complete freedom model. And we offer people the best sciences. They can take whatever they want from it and innovate, and make it better, or reject some percentage of what doesn't suit their locality or their sensibilities or their culture. And that's how they will remain healthy and not oppressed. Like every human being on the planet is feeling oppressed right now with this globalist model. So the word is yes, we are going ahead. Please join with us. And there is another question. Does Chandra Vikash ji have a website or channel to learn more about his work? And so, Chandra Vikash ji, if you could just put it in the chat. I remember that I said I would put Damanhor website in the chat, so I'm doing that right now. Thank you.
Yeah, so very quickly, Daryl, in just few lines, Jaisi Drishti, Vaisi Drishti. In English, we talk about self-fulfilling prophecies. So if you keep, harping on the Agenda 2030 and the New World Order their way, it could be New World Order our way. I mean, we right now have a non-indigenous world order. So we certainly need a new world order. Who can deny that? I mean, I, for example, have been preparing for this for a good nearly 2 decades. And I'll tell you, with my kind of preparation, if you are really want to experience my world, you're most welcome. And I can tell you there's only hope and, lots of vigor, lots of new enthusiasm. COVID has not all been bad. It shouldn't make you sad and morose. There are lots of brighter sides to it. You need to explore that. There are lots of blessings in disguise. I think we've, kind of closed our minds to just the shock and awe, the tricks of the cabal or the Illuminati or the deep state, whatever you want to call them. But I think we, as ancient wisdom of our civilizations, which goes, aeons, since aeons, we are far more smarter and far more, in control. Let them, run out of steam. They've already done that. I think with the COVID story, it's actually the end note of the Euro-Western universalism. That's the larger construct, the larger narrative that I would like to put up. And indigenous world order is the only world order which can take us to safety, which can take us to health, harmony, happiness, joy, and bliss. Period.
Thank you, Chandra Vikash ji. If I could just remind you to post the links of your website or channel in the chat box, and I'll move on to the last question. If it's open to the panelists, can you suggest us books, resources to learn about more indigenous methods of conserving soil, water, air, such as DAS?
Soil, water conservation, forest conservation, these are very simple technologies. There is not much, very high learning to do. It has to be done on the ground. And it's very difficult to, explain to somebody how these things are done unless that person actually comes to the ground. As Darryl was saying, that you have to go there and experiment on your own. You can have various theories and this and that and all that, but actually you have to do it. like Chandra Vikash was mentioning that our house, we are carbon positive. We contribute energy to the grid. We recharge all our water, but that has evolved over time. So we have a farm also, and in that also we are positive. We produce our own food. In fact, we produce more food than we need, even though we have just 1 acre farm. We produce much more than our family is just 3 people. So all these can be possible. The thing is that it's not the technology part, and when you are asking that, you can just Google. You can Google for afforestation. You can Google for say soil and water conservation or renewable energy, and you will find a lot of things. Main thing is how to implement that. So, for instance, in our community, the layout that we live, I have been trying to convince other people to follow our model. But those guys, all our neighbors, think that I am a madcap. So they're not interested in what I'm doing. You see, so that is the main thing, that how do we get people on board, which is what Chandra Vikas and Darryl are fighting for. I am trying to do it with Adivasis. Even that is difficult because the market has penetrated in such a way. They have the resources, whatever, as Darryl was saying, that whole sustainable development goal model that is there, it's not being implemented at all, because it's a fraud. You say all these good things that has to be done, that has to be done, and all that, but actually you don't do that. So you just जो हिंदी में कहते हैं बरगलाने की बात है, you just tell people that all these things has to be done, but actually you're not doing it. You set up UN is saying all these things. The whole structure of UN is very centralized. If you have interacted with the UN, because I have interacted with all these UN guys and all that, so they are almost corrupt. First of all those people, it's a bureaucracy, so it's a corrupt bureaucracy. So all these, these have to be avoided. So when you ask that what to do, first thing is you get in touch with people near you who are prepared to do these kind of things and form a community. That is the main thing. For sustainable agriculture, for instance, it requires a huge amount of labor. Composting, you have to replace the factory-made urea, DAP, and whatnot, all these things. That has a different, I won't go into all that because that's a long story by itself. But that has to be replaced by community coming together to make compost. So that can't be possible. A single farmer is difficult. We do it as a single farmer because we are not dependent on that farm for our income. I earn my money from somewhere else, actually doing consultancies for all these crooks, whom I call crooks, like World Bank and United Nations and all that. But actually, to do that, you need the community to come together. So instead of thinking about where the technology is not the main thing. The main thing is the community coming together. That is my opinion, basically.
Yes, and I would just like to add something that I remembered about 3 years back on Facebook. Somebody, I was talking. I put a post about this organic community farm that I was doing, inviting people to it, and all of that. And I was just telling people about the other things I was doing in Goa. And somebody from out of Goa mentioned, Darryl, you are so lucky that you got the opportunities in Goa to do all of these things. You are so lucky that you came from city and you got all this. So I just had to reply to that person. See, very frankly, I'm telling you, there were no opportunities. Okay, I went and made each one of them. I went to Goa living at the top of my, this career as a supply chain consultant, doing projects for complex manufacturing, advanced planning and scheduling systems. When I was offered CEO, and then I said, my God, do I manage a company or do I have anything better to do in my life? Why don't I go and manage my village and my state and, create a better world for people? So at the top of my career, I left. Then my engineering friend said, oh my gosh, what are you going to go and do? I said, I'm going to write a book on health and I'm going to teach people health. They said, have you written a book in your life before? I said, never, I've never done that. So there were all these things. You will go, you will not make money. You will see after 1 year, you will come back. But it so turned out that I went to Goa. I wrote my book. During that time, I was treating patients. So I made money. For the first 6 months, it was less money. But after that 1 year time, I was making the same salary that I was doing in Mumbai. And then after a couple of years, I was making double the salary. So this is an incentive to people who are sitting in the city, who are, fed up and bored of their lives. The question is not, whether will I make more money there. Now, why I made more money here is because I was a first mover, and even now it's open up for everybody. So as soon as I came, I had 2, 3 lines of business. That's how I had 3 times the income. Okay, so focus on your vision, and your vision will become very clear when you see these, New Earth Summit speakers, and we are all talking what is already done. Okay, we are not drawing some fancy propositions in the air. We are talking of what is done, what is going on, and I invite you is to come and participate and have the same benefits in your life. Okay, so yeah, go for it, and you do not have to become somebody else or something else. Go for the things that are very close to you, and you'll find your place in the new ecosystem. New Earth, this whole summit, the New Earth Summit, and uh, whatever we are talking about is not going to happen. It is has to be done by people, and it's being done by people who have the vision. So yes, it's all there in your heart. I know. Now you get the sciences for it, and just go after it. There are people all around who will help you, and who are already in it and doing it. They will hold your hand and take you into a new amazing world uh, that people are talking of, which is the 5D Earth, a 5D dimensional Earth, shifting from the old third dimensional Earth that has manifested so much of frustration and so much of disease, sickness, and catastrophe on the planet, to a place where, like as Rahul ji was saying, it is easier to implement because these are the real life science. And there are people who are like way showers, they're called the way showers, and all of my speakers on the summit of all the 3 years are way showers. They're showing the way forward, they're putting out the new designs, and that's why I'm so thankful to all of them for giving their time and knowledge and experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. So we come to the end of today's session. A big thank you to our panelists, and thanks to our audience as well for hanging in there. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at the same time on the same link for our Day 11 topic, the Food Masterclass by Daryl De Souza, where you'll receive some deep knowledge on this topic that has never been presented before. Namaste and have a lovely evening.